now. So it will be made available for folks who were not able to join us today. Please, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box as we go along to direct questions to the appropriate speaker. As always, please be mindful of everyone else here. Please keep yourself on mute unless you have a question to ask. Otherwise, we're going to do some quick introductions from some of the other representatives from state networks that are on the call with us today. And so I'm just going to call out states, and I'm going to let those folks introduce themselves from that appropriate state network. And first, we're going to start with Jenna in Texas.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We're so glad that you're able to join us today. This is such an important moment to be advocating. So I'm going to kick us off with the now more than ever, we need to be telling our stories, and excited to have you with us to talk more about how we do that together. Like Tom said, my name is Jenna Courtney, and I am the Executive Director of the Texas Partnership for Out of School Time. So a few of you from Texas in the chat, and we're really glad that you're here.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna. Zelda from South Carolina.
Hi, and welcome everyone. I'm Zelda Weimer, the Executive Director of the South Carolina After School Alliance, and hope you enjoy what we have to offer.
Awesome. Thanks, Zelda. How about John from Tennessee?
I'm glad to be here. I'm John Rust with the Tennessee After School Network. It was great working with these folks to pull all this stuff together for this, and I hope you all find it very helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Uzma from Georgia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Uzma Azhar. I'm the Policy and Outreach Manager at the Georgia Statewide After School Network, and currently I'm enjoying the weather in my patio, and I hope all of you get to do that as well.
Uzma, I'm very jealous because it's dark and stormy out my window that I'm looking out of right now, so I'm very jealous of you. How about Brian from Florida?
Hey, thanks, Tom. Brian Hickey, I'm the director of the Florida After School Network. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation today. I think we have I think 2020 has unveiled some unique engagement opportunities for us, and I'm really glad we get to share across states here so that we don't have to get to reinvent the wheel. So thanks for having me, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Lavetta in Arkansas.
Good afternoon, and so glad to be with you all. I am Lavita Wills Hale, Network Director for the Arkansas Out of School Network.
Awesome. Thank you. Michael from Kansas.
Hey, everybody. This is Michael Lemon. I'm the Director of the Kansas Enrichment Network here in Kansas, and I'm really excited to be here and hope to offer some ideas, and just really glad to be doing this cross-state work together with all of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. We also have a couple special guests with us. So I'd like to introduce Alexis from the After School Alliance. Alexis, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me on this afternoon to talk about all the exciting things that we can do with Lights On After School this year. My name is Alexis Steiners-Rao, and I am the Vice President of Field Outreach at the After School Alliance, and it's great to see you all today.
Thanks for being here, Alexis. And just so everybody knows, we have a celebrity in the after school arena who's joined us. Dr. Terry Peterson has joined us on the call. So welcome, sir. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. I was just trying to sneak in.
Oh,
You didn't let me do that.
yeah, you can. I'm sorry. You can't sneak in. No, not you.
A Zelda's group, so make believe I'm not here.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody again for joining us. If you've joined us while we were doing introductions, please feel free to drop your intro into the chat box so we know who you are, where you're coming from today. In addition, we still have a poll question up. We'd love to know if you've contacted elected officials before to advocate on behalf of out of school time programs. So we're going to go ahead and move on into the program. First thing we're going to talk about is how we can best incorporate youth voice into our advocacy, and especially around Lights On After School, and also what that looks like, obviously, in the context of COVID-19. So to kick us off with that, I'm going to hand it over to Zelda.
Well, thank you, Tom. During the pandemic, after-school programs have been innovating in inspiring ways, from coordinating childcare for essential workers, providing food for families in need, helping students catch up and keep up academically, serving as distribution sites to deliver classwork, and keeping your doors open when school doors were closed. In thinking big and bold about redesigning the learning days to meet the needs of our families and helping communities recover and rebuild stronger, let's not forget the voice of our children and youth. Lights On After School is a great opportunity to hear our youth voice. Here are some innovative ways to engage students. In South Carolina, students will tackle a real-world problem relevant to their community. Our theme centers around how you can contribute towards making our community a livable for all. Using areas of computer science, engineering, visual arts, and spoken word, we have created scenarios for students to problem solve, dialogue, use critical thinking skills, and their leadership. So here are some examples in those areas. For computer science, we ask students to identify a need in their community that has been impacted by COVID-19. You can take it a step further and challenge them to create or discuss how they would create a mobile or web app that assists, improves, enhances, or informs a targeted audience about the availability of services. With school back in session, you could challenge your engineering mindset by asking your students to redesign their classroom to maximize connectivity while social distancing. Ask your students to design and discuss how that would look like. For visual arts, provide students an opportunity to share their thoughts using their choice of media and design and create 1 or 2 pieces of artwork that showcases the COVID-19 impact on their life, and imagine how their community could apply lessons learned from COVID-19 to become more connected. For spoken word, ask students to consider the impact of COVID-19 or how the impact of social justice has made on their family and their community. Lessons learned and how they propose changing their life and the lives of others in their community. Challenge your students to design, create, and perform a spoken word piece that chronicles 2020 and how it can lead to positive outcomes and results. You can take many approaches to these scenarios, using youth voice from a panel discussion to designing, building, and testing a prototype or pitching an innovation with their team. These techniques are compatible to a face-to-face environment or virtual. In South Carolina, we're implementing virtual opportunities for our students. And in closing, I encourage you to be creative and come up with other areas of focus like aerospace, cybersecurity, civic engagement, and there are so many others in other areas. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zelda, for sharing that information with us. We know that it is so critical to have youth voice at the table when we're advocating for programs, and also having youth voice involved in our after-school programs and our advocacy efforts builds up so many skills within those youth that we serve that it's just critically important. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective. We're going to transition now. We're going to hear from Brian from Florida and also Alexis from the After School Alliance to talk a little bit about what makes 2020 so special, and trying to figure out how to celebrate Lights On and do advocacy work, whether that is virtually or, in some cases, if we can do some safely in-person activities. So Brian, I'll hand it over to you first.
All right, thank you. Yes, Tom, it is, looking at Florida as an example, we do have communities that are not in person right now. We do have communities that are 100% virtual, and we have communities that are in person. And so there is a balance, and it is really dependent upon the situation in your community and understanding that. And it's okay in both situations. And I think we all need to appreciate that we are all in different situations and different climates, different areas. And so for us, I think having that, those differences that we can take advantage of. Connecting with our local leaders is more important than ever. Not just our local, but local, state, and federal. And having them understand the process and situation that our after-school programs are going through on a daily basis, making sure that they understand how the youth are being engaged, understanding how the families are being connected to the work, and understanding all of those different steps really will open their eyes to the situations that everyone is going through. And it's something that we cannot let go. We can't just assume that they understand and that they are hearing everyone. So Lights On After School is more important than ever this year, because this is the time for us to explain how this pandemic is affecting this industry, how it's affecting our youth, and how it's affecting our families, businesses, and everything. So two very important folks that I believe you need to get engaged are your Chamber of Commerce, your business leaders. They need to understand how this is affecting their employees and their families and the staff that they have. And they also need to understand how the outlook on their local community is being affected by this. So much of what happens in after school affects our local economy because it's the people that are running the economy. So that's a definite important folks to get engaged to this. The other one is make sure you're engaging your school board. If you have elected school superintendent, your school board members, make sure they understand. If you're in an after-school program that is not directly related to a on-site school, make sure that they understand that you're there and that you're being engaged with them, and that they understand the process that you're going through. So this is the time more than ever to get engaged and reach out to those folks, whether it be in person or virtually. I think we have some great opportunities, especially with virtually, because we can reach out to them before, the day of, and the day after, just to make sure that we can connect with them, see what's happening, and see how Lights On After School is playing an important role in those communities.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. I think you raised up a really great point in that, so often we are focused on engaging with elected officials, but it's also so important to engage with our business partners and those influencers in your community, right? Oftentimes, folks that have maybe the most influence in the community aren't necessarily in elected capacity. So that's a great reminder for all of us. Thank you for bringing that up. Alexis, I want to turn a question over to you from the After School Alliance perspective. We just last year we wrapped up the 20th anniversary of Lights On. It was such a huge event, so many different exciting things happening. So from the Alliance's perspective, how different is 2020 and how are we making it special?
So 2020 is going to be a little different, as I think we're all well aware. And we at the After School Alliance, when we were deciding whether or not we wanted to do Lights On After School this year, given the state of our country, challenges, the pandemic, some schools being in person, some after school programs being virtual, we decided more than ever this is a year where we need to be out talking and advocating and sharing the good news and the excitement that is after school programs and how they benefit all children across the country. So things will be a little different. And we're very much cognizant of that. And so we've tried to create a variety of tools and resources that can help you think through what to do for Lights On After School this year, depending on whatever circumstances your after school program might be in, or what your circumstances are in your community. So one of the things I would strongly recommend that you do is visit our website, afterschoolalliance.org, and go to our Lights On After School section of the webpage. There you can register your event. And once you do that, you are able to access, there will be some posters that will be sent to you that you can hang up in windows at your program, yard signs, wherever to try and advertise that, hey, this is something that's going on, this is a bright spot in our community. You'll also be put on our email list where we get some weekly planning tips and other ideas to think about how you might structure your event this year, because it's going to be a little different than the big open houses and carnivals and other community building activities that we've done in the past. Also on our website, we have a couple of sections that have broken out how to do a socially distancing in-person Lights On After School event this year, as well as some ideas for what to do virtually. And I can tell you there's a lot of fantastic ideas and some really creative ways to put a spin on things that we've been doing before. If you can't bring your entire community together in one location, light up a landmark. Something we've been encouraging for a while, and this year is the perfect opportunity if you've got a landmark in your town to reach out to the people in your community to see if you can light that up. Leverage social media opportunities. I've seen some ideas where programs are hosting student art shows online because they're going to do posts with the artwork that students have made to try and engage their communities that way. Another community is doing a art walk where they can have people come and socially distance and see some of the things that youth are doing. Online opportunities are boundless. You can use Zoom as a tool to bring people together, to talk, to get them excited about after school, and to showcase student performances. One program we've heard from is doing a Zoom dance party so that it's a fun event for kids and their families, and it also brings the community together to see how important these are for ensuring that children, are really still staying connected despite these difficult times. So there's lots of opportunities and ideas there, and we can help you plan out those events. So definitely visit our website, sign up for that. We'll walk you through how to plan the perfect virtual event, and we'll also walk you through ideas of what you could possibly be doing to try and provide some of those socially distant opportunities. There's also some ideas and suggestions on our webpage too about engaging the media and engaging those policymakers and those other community folks that Brian mentioned as well that are so critical to helping build support for these programs as well. And in some cases, there's a silver lining opportunity here. In the past, you may have been trying to get a local representative, your mayor, someone who might have a busy schedule and couldn't necessarily commit to coming to see your Lights On After School event or come visit your after school program. What we're finding is actually, now that everybody is being connected virtually, there's greater opportunities to bring some of those people in and engage them in conversation. So there may be, this may be actually the greatest time for you to be able to try and build up some of those relationships as well. So Tom, I'll hand it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alexis, for sharing that. I think one thing that you're bringing up, and I hope that everyone on the call is seeing, is that you are certainly not alone when you're trying to do these things. You have a ton of support, whether that is from at the national level, the After School Alliance, your state networks who are on the call with you today. We are more than happy to engage with you, brainstorm with you, help you figure out what would work best in your local neighborhood, your local community. So please, even when it comes to things after Lights On, after school is over, we are here to be a network and a community of support for you. So definitely take advantage of that if you need to. I'm actually going to go back to Alexis here briefly to talk about, obviously, we've seen just a tremendous response that after school programs have made because of COVID-19. They have been able to just really navigate this pretty brilliantly to continue to serve thousands of students, thousands of families all over the country. And we're bringing this group of states together because many of us, we're primarily located in the South. We primarily have Republican legislatures and maybe more conservative policymakers in our states. And so really trying to learn from one another about what messages are good to share out with them. So Alexis, from your perspective, why is advocacy, we know that advocacy is important, but why is it so important right now to get that word out?
So I think actually a lot of really great points have been raised thus far in this conversation about why advocacy is important. As Tom stated, after school programs, you have all responded to the call to come in and really help support your communities, support the children and youth in your communities by providing safe spaces, continuing to build on those community connections and helping kids still continue to achieve academically. as well as providing enrichment and in many ways an escape from some of the challenges, fears, and concerns that they may have right now because of the current environment. So more than ever, this is the time to be doing after school, because we do know that there is still a great need for these programs, and we can show how after school has pivoted. It's more than just daycare, that after school is providing so many other opportunities, so much more to children and youth. We need to continue to build up relationships with our policymakers and with others in our community that could be allies or could be potential allies to help continue to support our programs. So this is part of the reason why advocacy is important. There may be opportunities coming down the road to be providing additional funding support in terms of education, especially as programs are going virtual or trying to figure out hybrid schedules and things like that. And it's important for us to make sure that we are on the radar of many of those key decision makers, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level. So being able to advocate and bring them into something like Lights On After School, which is a great advocacy opportunity, to show them why these programs are important and what they're doing, and allow them to find ways to interact with parents and youth as well, who can be some of your biggest advocates and biggest voices. The other thing is that this year is also an election year, which it's hard to believe with everything else that is going on. And maybe some of us would like to forget that it is an election year. It is that too. And so Lights On After School, which falls just a couple of weeks before Election Day, is the perfect opportunity to also be building relationships with candidates, as well as your currently elected officials who may be running for re-election, to make sure that they understand that after school is integral to any conversation on education, and that's important to continue to support and fund these programs. So encourage your elected officials and other candidates that may be running for office to come in and participate, whether virtually or in person, at your Lights On After School events. Just make sure you invite everybody. You have to invite all candidates in order to not run afoul of any election laws as it concerns nonprofit organizations. And I think Jen is going to get into a little bit on lobbying later. But definitely that is something. We're all rising to the moment. That's what we like to say at our organization. Every after-school program in the country is really rising to the moment and coming up with creative and unique ideas to be able to support and serve kids. And we want to be able to highlight and bring that to the public so that they understand the importance of these programs. And that's one of the major reasons why advocacy is so key this year, and Lights On After School is key as well. It's a celebration, and we do actually have things to celebrate because we are still serving kids and we are finding endless creative ways to be able to do so. Tom?
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that last point that you made is really key, in that I know that everyone has been under so much stress. There's been, we're now, as kids are starting to come back to school in person, we're seeing, the trauma that lots of kids and families have gone through. And that's important to recognize, but it is also very important to celebrate these great successes that we've had, that programs are still open. They're still serving kids, whether, they've pivoted to do that in different ways, but they still are serving kids, serving families, and rising to the moment. So thank you for bringing that up. Now I'm going to hand it over to Levita. We want to hear from Levita in Arkansas about what does advocacy, we know now, is so important, but what does that look like more on a local level, and how do we mobilize our communities and our organizations within our state to really make that advocacy message driven home for local policymakers, state policymakers, and our federal policymakers. So, Levita?
Thank you so much, Tom. And again, thank you to all of you. I am going to attempt to share my screen because I thought I would share a few of our slides to help illustrate our points today. So. Okay. All right. And okay, so let me back up a little bit. I'll just do it that way. It's a little easier. As everyone can see that okay? So I want to say, first of all, if you can see the visual that I have behind me, it's the visual of our Arkansas State Capitol. And I did that intentionally just for you all today, because I think now more than ever, all roads lead to our state houses. And so with that in mind, we launched our Arkansas Youth Opportunity Campaign. We did so in the wake of the social unrest related to systemic racism and other issues, but we also did that in response to COVID-19 and the disparate impact that we're seeing on various communities within our state. And so as a result of that, our Youth Opportunity Campaign focuses on the issue of education and equity, health and mental health. It's already mentioned that children are experiencing a great deal of trauma. Arkansas has one of the highest rates of adverse childhood experiences in the country, as well as juvenile justice and workforce preparation. And so we had our Youth Policy Summit. We held that on September the 18th and 19th via Zoom and Facebook Live. We were able to get support from our faith-based advisory committee to help us really engage more at a local level statewide. And as a result of that, I'll tell you a little bit, but we also were strategic in the way that we engaged through our social media. And we used all of our platforms. And what you have on the screen is just a sample calendar of how we engage through Twitter, through Facebook. We also had things on Pinterest where our out of school time programs were encouraged to take and make these messages their own. We also had social media engagement signs that we asked our stakeholders to upload and change their profile pictures on Facebook. And so I should also tell you that our theme was Good Trouble. And so we have used the hashtag WeAR as in Arkansas Good Trouble, meaning that we're going to follow in the footsteps of the late Congressman John Lewis. We're going to get in the good trouble and necessary trouble of advocating, strategizing, mobilizing, and advocating on behalf of our young people. And as we say here in Arkansas, our young people are worth the trouble. Here's another engagement sign that we thought would really speak to young people, because we want young people to be a part of this. And Zelda so eloquently talked about youth voice. And so these are social media engagement signs and tools that will carry us forward into our campaign through our upcoming legislative session next year, where we will be asking young people to talk about the good trouble that they're getting into as a result of their after-school experience. So, as a result of September the 18th and 19th, this is what we saw. We had more than 100 attendees to log into our Zoom platform the day of the summit, but we were also pleased to have another 225 streaming with us via Facebook Live. We saw our social media engagement increase to the tune of 155% for just that week alone. Who were our mobilization partners? And this is really critical. As you think about now more than ever is a good time to reach out, to engage your partners. I know Jenna's going to talk about lobbying. A lot of what we do, I will say most of what we do in the out of school network arena is not lobbying. Most of what we do is outreach and education. And you can use your time in an unlimited way to do that. But every message, every strategy needs a mobilization strategy. And who are those partners? We've listed those. We use our faith-based community. You use your assets. So I would encourage you, before you think about your mobilization strategy, you do an asset map of who your key partners, folks who have scale statewide. And so what we have listed here on this screen, we have state level partners who have chapters or involvement in each of our 75 counties. So that allowed us to scale up our outreach and will help us amplify our message going forward. So it's not only message, It's not only strategy, it's mobilization, it's your partners. And so this is the kind of the bones of our campaign. And what you see is that we have enabling legislation. Our participants ranked these priorities, and these are just a few of the highlights. But to continue to work on an appropriation for the Positive Youth Development Act 166, to build upon our existing allocation of TANF funding, which we were able to secure this year during the pandemic, which is roughly $1.5 million of dedicated TANF funding, which is the surplus in, or part of our surplus in our state. As a part of our ongoing ask, we do not want that to be a one-time, so we will continue to work to ensure that that carries forward as a part of the surplus spending going forward. And then certainly to increase our partnerships with career and technical education stakeholders. So what are our campaign markers as a part of our mobilization strategy? We've already launched, as many of you, our Million Girls Moonshot. We see that aligning with our career and technical education strategy. On the 26th of this month, of September, we joined our state level Career, Technical, and Education Advisory Committee. That was an outgrowth of our summit. This week and this weekend, we will join our Arkansas Public Policy Panel at their Citizens First State Congress State Convention. This is a part of our mobilization strategy. We have a resolution on as a part of the education ask that will be presented at that convention. Again, on the 9th of October this month, we're having our own statewide, state-level webinar on Lights On After School. We will be launching, and this year's theme will be our Good Trouble virtual youth sit-ins, where we ask young people wherever they are. Most of them will be at home. So we ask them to sit in, to perform, to speak up, to have a youth voice component, to tell us why now more than ever, after school is important to them. We also ask them to use the engagement signs. Obviously, we'll be celebrating along with you on Lights On After School, but after the fact, we will continue our mobilization strategy, November 1 through 12/15, with regional meetings where we will really unpack these strategies and think about how and who and when to engage our policymakers. In other words, now more than ever, it is important for us to have a plan that accompanies our mobilization strategy. And then finally, all roads lead to the building behind me, which is our Arkansas State Capitol. This year, next year, our state legislative session will be virtual. So we'll have to find ways to stay connected. So everything that I presented to you today, our social media, our mobilization strategy, will all lead to our state capitol. And we will engage those policymakers virtually. We will do so in our local communities, hence those regional meetings. We'll be planning on how to do that. And whenever it's safe and appropriate, we'll do so in person. But most of all, we have a sound plan and a sound mobilization strategy. So thank you for allowing me to share that today.
Thank you so much. You raised up so many great points. One, I think we're all in agreement that we love that the hashtag and the theme of your advocacy and outreach. I think it's so important. You demonstrated the importance of having a plan, following it through, and engaging as many people as you can along the way to mobilize that effort. And so I encourage everyone that's on the call today to really plug in to your state networks to understand what that plan looks like in your state and how you can amplify that message in your local community and contribute to that voice that we're all trying to raise up. Just like Levita said, with all roads leading to our state capitol building. So thank you so much for sharing that. As many of you know, it's so important to share stories. The stories of the amazing work that's going on can be a great way to share the outcomes and the successes that are happening in local programs all over the country. And so we've asked Uzma from Georgia to talk a little bit about how their state network is collecting stories and telling the story of after school for Lights On.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you everyone for being here today. I really hope this is a useful webinar for everyone, and you bring home great ideas. And as all of my colleagues have said previously, Lights On After School is a great opportunity to promote your program and to invite leaders from the community to see it in action and how you're serving the community. And while GSAN has partnered with multiple programs in the past across the state, not only to join their day of celebration, but also help get legislators to the programs so that they can see how the programs are serving their districts. In the era of COVID, things have been a bit different. And while it makes a lot of traditional celebrations difficult, as both Alexis and Brian mentioned, now is the time to elevate programs and show how important they are during this pandemic, especially as they support students, their learning, and their social and emotional development. Please excuse the background noises. So what GSAN decided to do was we decided to host a Lights On After School town hall on October 19th at 3 p.m. because after school starts at 3 p.m., even though that's not the case anymore. And we wanted to celebrate the many ways that after school is supporting Georgia's children, families, and communities. We've partnered with a number of programs, and we'll be able to see multiple virtual pre-recorded tours of the programs in action. We also wanted to specifically focus on how programs are providing support during the school day and supporting K-12 learning. In addition to that, we'll also be able to hear from staff and family, but especially students, about how after school is supporting them and why it's now more important than ever to keep lights on both during and after school. And just like Zelda and Lavita mentioned, we wanted to make sure that we lifted up the voices of youth, especially because these programs are shaping their development. They're the ones that are most impacted by these programs. So we wanted to make sure that we made them part of our programming. And finally, we'll also be having some providers joining us live that will talk about the importance of after school. And we're also hoping to get some young people live, especially because of the timing that we chose. So fingers crossed. And I can get more information about that to Tom later. This is one of the downsides of patio. I can get more information to Tom later about registering for our event. It'll be a meeting, so anyone and everyone is welcome to join. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, so I did want to do, before I hand it off to Jenna to talk a little bit, I know that especially when I was a local site coordinator for my after school program, I was always very nervous about talking to elected officials, afraid I was going to get in trouble for lobbying or breaking some sort of rule. So Jenna's going to talk to us about that in a little bit, just to alleviate some of our fears. But before I hand it off, I do want to make sure that everyone knows to really get connected with your state network and your network leads. Just like Uzma mentioned, we're going to share all of these resources out in a post-Zoom email. So you'll have all the contact information that you need, information about other events that the state networks are hosting when it comes to Lights On After School, so you can take advantage of that. Also want to talk about why it's so important to be connected with your state network. We want more than anything to be your advocate. And so many of us come from the after school programming world. We've done the jobs that you're doing now. And so we are so passionate about lifting up the incredible work that you're doing to state lawmakers, to policymakers, to our federal delegations in Congress. So we need to hear your stories about the amazing work that you're doing so that we can continue to advocate on behalf of the entire field in our state, and then on behalf of the entire after school field nationwide. Another great advantage to connecting with your state network, we can help amplify your message. If you're hosting events, we can share those via our social media channel. We can lift up the important messages that you're trying to get out to a grander scale, to a wider audience. Oftentimes, we are also that one point of contact for state agencies or for state elected officials, right? They are busy people. They don't often have time to, keep in touch with every single after school program all over the state. So we can be that one contact for them and direct them out, when the governor's office calls and says, you know, the governor's going to be in the western part of the state, he wants to visit an after-school program, as long as we know your story, we know that we can send the governor out to you, take a tour of your after-school program, and hopefully bring some much-needed attention for the work that you're doing. And I think I can speak for everyone in that we love to be connectors as well. So we love to connect local programs with resources, with other programs who are experiencing similar things. We'd love to connect you with our partners like Alexis at the After School Alliance. As I've been in this role for a year now, I love connecting programs with my other state network lead colleagues. So you can see all the amazing kind of brain power you have in this Zoom and all the great work that's being done in several states. So we love to be that connection point for you as well. Again, I know I said this earlier, but I would like to reiterate, you're never alone when you're working in the after school world. Don't ever feel that way. You have your state network to lean on. We have our national partners. And now through, you know, opportunities like this, you also have colleagues from across the country that you can lean on and reach out to make a bigger network for yourself. So that's why it's so important to be connected with your state network. So I'm going to hand it over to Jenna now so she can give us some of the quick do's and don'ts for lobbying versus advocacy, and then we'll have a couple minutes for questions at the end.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. And I mean, what an inspiring group of people this was a pleasure to plan and an even bigger pleasure to get to kind of be a part of today, to hear all of these wonderful ideas and see how they're going to kind of be taken into action. And I feel like Levita set me up so well in talking about all of this work around mobilizing and all roads leading back to our state capitals. It's so true. It's so important. The good news is that the hopefully very, very brief rundown of what lobbying is and isn't is entirely meant to empower you to feel more comfortable doing all of this work that we're talking about. The rules are a little bit confusing, and that's why it's so important to have conversations around them. The good news is that I'm going to say 90+% of what we've talked about today on this call is advocacy. It is not lobbying. And so I do want to jump in on a couple key points as a starting point. Levita asked a really great question. Who are your mobilization partners as you're trying to tell your message, share your message, amplify your message? Obviously the networks for those of you who are programs on this call. But I think that we also are constantly asking ourselves that question, who are our partners? Do we need to develop them? Are they not yet our partners? And I think that is a very key component of this advocacy work around Lights On After School. Brian brought up partners like school districts and chambers of commerce. Educating them, raising awareness about the work that we do is exactly what Lights On After School is all about. That is not lobbying. Doing those same things with your legislators is not lobbying. If you are educating about what you're doing, how that impacts kids, that is supremely important advocacy work and storytelling. And like Levita said, do it with a plan, do it with a strategy. That isn't, talking to legislators doesn't inherently make it lobbying. And I think that's a really important thing. You are building relationships, you're developing connections. Those are all very important steps in a longer process where only one very small part of it is actually lobbying. What that lobbying is, and I'm going to run through this specifically for 501c3s. So I do want to make that disclaimer. Those of you that are not part of AC3, whether on your own, like Text Post happens to be, or as kind of under that umbrella, the rules are different. But for 501c3 public charities, there are two general sets of rules that 501c3s follow. And at its most basic level, what that means is if that you are communicating with a legislator, if you are, and those are actually two things. So let me back up. If you are having communications, if you are doing it with a legislator, and if it expresses a specific view about that legislation, support this bill, oppose this bill, that is lobbying. If you are engaging in, this is what after school does, and these are all of the ways that we serve kids, that isn't lobbying. It's very important to understand that most of the conversations that we've talked about today do not run afoul of any lobby rules. And also, if you are a 501c3, you are legally allowed to lobby within the rules and parameters that are set out by the IRS. So I don't want to tell anyone that they're allowed to if you are not a C3, but if you are a C3, you are absolutely legally allowed to lobby within specific parameters around that behavior, tracking it. There are limits on it, but it is 100% legal for you to do that. And as we've said, so important to do so if you are able, because those decisions in the Capitol affect your programs, your kids that you're serving, your communities. And so that's why that education is also so important. If people aren't aware of what we're doing, then they won't know how their policies will impact things. For the 2 tests for C3s, just very briefly, and I'd love to answer questions about lobbying since I did used to be a lobbyist. For if you have made an H election, which is a very easy one piece of paperwork, do it if you are a C3. I'm not an attorney, but do it if you're a C3. It makes your life a lot easier. Very specific rules, direct costs, including staff time and overhead, but it is a question of the dollars that are spent, not the activities that are conducted. The other test, which is by default where C3s are, is called the insubstantial part test, and that's activity-based. And so it's more difficult to quantify because if you have volunteers who are lobbying, if you have donated materials, it gets a little bit harder to track, but again, it is still legal for you to do that. And so like I said, I would love to answer questions about this. I don't want to take up more of our time without knowing how many C3s we have that this is relevant to. But know that you can absolutely be engaging in conversations with legislators. And if you're not having an ask at the end, if you are educating them about the work that you do and why it's important, that is advocacy and that is not lobbying. And we would love to help you do more of that as your state networks.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Jen. I do think that like I said earlier, that was some of my biggest fears when I was a program director. And so hopefully that kind of alleviates some of those anxieties for folks. I did want to point out before we get to a couple questions, John from Tennessee had to jump off the call a little bit early, and he did have some great ideas on how to kind of prompt kids and families who are in your programs about how they can celebrate life on after school, either at home or virtually. And so we're going to share those out in the post-Zoom email so that everyone has those. But I did want to, not to put you on the spot, but I did want to give Michael a chance to chime in just on kind of what he's heard today, anything to add, or anything like that.
Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm Michael from Kansas. Just wanted to, I kind of want to open the floor up. Sometimes I was talking to these folks during the planning calls, and ideation sometimes is really where the rubber meets the road. So if there are folks out there that want to throw something at the wall and see if it sticks, you've got an opportunity here to talk that out with us. This could just be one opportunity. It doesn't have to be the last one. Like Tom had mentioned, we are here to be supportive of all of you. But if there are ideas or things that people just want to share or see if they stick, now's a great time to do it. You've got an audience of people, so we're really here to help. So we can throw ideas out. I think we've already shared quite a few, but if there's something that people are thinking about and it's not quite formulated, that's okay. But we'd love to share, love to hear from you and just see where it goes.
Yes, definitely. I want to second that, Michael. Please. I don't think it's very often that you get quite as many experts in one space to ask your questions. So please, anything that's on your mind, shoot those out. Feel free to unmute yourself, put them in the chat. I'm going to launch a second poll though. I want to know kind of after our conversation today, how many people are going to be contacting elected officials as part of your Lights On celebration. So we'll have that open as people can ask questions. Or our speakers were so great today that every question has already been answered in their minds.
What I'll say is just to kind of offer this up, if anyone does ever want to talk, the ideas can range from something as specific or as simple as lighting up a sign of an after-school program with lights that you're taking a photo of and putting that on social media. That's such a basic thing that you could do just to highlight your program and make something happen. It doesn't have to be an elaborate event on every level. There are things that you can do on a micro level that I think are possible for anyone out there, all the way up to some of the ideas that you heard about from Levita that, around, hosting a larger event that is more of a summit. So please know it runs the gamut, and anything that you do is hoping to get the word out. So let us know if there's anything we can do. We can ideate with you. We're here to help and be supportive because, now more than ever, we've been talking about now more than ever, youth are out of school a lot now. So hybrid approaches are happening for sure, but then we also don't know what it's going to look like over the next 3 to 6 months. So we're here to be supportive of that endeavor. So let us know what we can do.
Thanks for that message, Michael. And what's exciting for me is I get to be the MC, so I get to do whatever I want on this Zoom. And so I'm actually going to put Dr. Peterson on the hot seat right now and see if he just has any words of wisdom for us as we head into this Lights On season.
First of all, I want to thank each of you for what a great explanation and variety of activities that have been described, and sort of tamping down, like you said, the great concern that, oh my God, I'm lobbying. You can talk to legislators and elected officials anytime you want, and you should. I have much of my family is not in public service, they're in road construction. I can't walk through a grocery store if I'm with them, airport. If they see a legislator, a mayor, a congressman, or a woman, they are on top of them and say, "Oh, hey, I just helped build a road in your area." Now, they define their areas like with 200 miles of where the legislator is. They don't know, and oh man, it's so important to have good roads and airports. And oh, I just appreciate your support. And we need some help. We don't have enough money. They don't often, now they can lobby, but they often don't need to go there. They're just trying to show that they make a difference and they need support and then lay out a few things. That's not lobbying either. Particularly in this climate, we need protective devices. We need ways to have drop-in meals and all kinds of things that aren't typically needed. But the thing I'd like to really focus on for a minute is, while we're working on how to get through the next few months, legislators, state legislators, mayors, and school districts are planning next summer and next school year's budgets. It's hard to figure that out. We're in a crisis, but they have to get, a lot of them by law, have to do certain things to prepare their laws or their budgets for next summer. And I really think while we're getting through this tough time period, really think about ways in which all the learnings we've had in helping young people and families get through the pandemic actually can put us in a better position to argue that next summer, when it's very likely we'll have a lot of in-person activity, maybe not totally, and we might have learned some things from virtual that we can use in summers, and next school year, back in person, but there also may be things we've learned virtually and from all the things you just described that might actually work just fine or even better in almost a so-called regular school year. So I would think of strategies that you can talk about now, but also pivot to say, hey, if we can deliver now, just imagine what we can do next summer and school year. I'm sensing that people, particularly educators, if they have time to breathe, are thinking, so many kids are going to be so far behind in every aspect, from health, academics, enrichment, social emotional learning. They're going to be hungry for new ideas of what can we do next summer and next school year. And I think about some things that might be really big, good trouble that before might not have been, it might have sounded too grandiose. They still might be grandiose, but it might be really important. I'm going on a little long, but I want to give you one example. Something happened to me, and every day you learn something. And I had the honor a year or so ago to give an award to Jeffrey Canada, who's the head of the Harlem Children's Zone, the Champion of Children Award. And he said something, it takes a little while to explain, but just I want you to kind of visualize this with me. Think of an 8th grader right now who's already 2 years behind in reading and math, which in our states that are here could be a third of the children, at least. Said, okay, going into the summer, or going into next school year, let's have them no summer opportunities and no after school opportunities. Now, in all the previous 8 years, they haven't even made 1 year of gain. If they're 2 years behind, they've been basically, losing a couple months a year. Now you're going to say, oh, they're going to get in 9th grade, they're going to catch up. Impossible, impossible, unless they have added opportunities and support in the summer and after school. So when people say, oh my goodness, they'll just catch up with a great 9th grade, do the math. It's impossible. Maybe 1 or 2 will. They have to have extra support, encouragement, excitement. And I think sometimes we have to really level with some of our folks to get real. And they can't, and that's just the academic side. Think of all the social emotional learning side. So I would applaud you for what you're doing, and also think about planting the seed now, for we really need some big summer and after school efforts next year with lots of partners. And I think Brian's right, a lot of employers and business people might really be interested in this, and educators who might have thought of us as a frill, and some might say, you're right. There's just, unless we get everybody involved, we can't possibly catch up and keep up. And that's kind of the term I use a lot, is summers and after school help kids catch up and keep up in a lot of arenas, and families. So I wish you the best. And I think it's one final thought. I'm glad somebody said and I live in South Carolina. I work around the country, but I work a lot in red states. And it's very different, the wording, the language. And I was thinking maybe you should create a red state coalition, but that term, that's sort of, that might not probably the right term. So then I thought, Levita made me think. So I thought maybe a Ruby coalition, Ruby after school and summer, sort of red. Then I thought I found another term. I looked for synonyms for red, and Ruby came up. But also, I know Zelda will love this one. It's Foxy. That's another synonym for red. So by using Ruby, you could have a lot of messages without saying that. But it might be really worth for you all to think about how to keep working together. I know the language is different. It's just, in some areas you should go into, but if you do, you aren't going to get anywhere. And we all know it's not an easy place to work, but it can be if you hit the right buttons and you all are doing the right things. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I will echo that. I think all of my colleagues that are state leads, I think we had a great time collaborating together to plan this event for you all. And I think we're very hopeful that we can continue to do more in the future to lift up our collective voice to make sure that kids and families in our states are getting the resources that they need. So thank you to everyone who was able to present with us today. Thank you to everyone who joined us. We really do appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to learn more about how you can use Lights On to advocate for out-of-school time programs. Like I mentioned earlier, there'll be a post-Zoom email coming out to all of you with contact information for your state networks, and also just some follow-up information as well. So remember, now more than ever, it's the time to advocate for your programs. You're doing such great things for kids. So continue to do the good work. And as Levita said, let's all go get in some good trouble. So thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll talk later.